Ladies and gentlemen, each of us is born with a dream, a purpose that is deep within our hearts. But how do we achieve these dreams? What guides us when the path gets tough? Today, we turn to the ultimate source of guidance, Jesus Christ. His life, teachings, and example offer us the perfect blueprint for achieving our dreams and living a life full of purpose. When it comes to achieving your dreams, the very first step is to have a deep and unwavering faith in God's plan for your life. Faith is not simply about believing that God exists, but about trusting that His will for you is good, that He has a purpose for you, and that His plan for your life is far greater than anything you could imagine for yourself. In Matthew 17:20, Jesus tells us, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can move mountains." This verse carries a powerful message that even the smallest amount of faith can bring about great change. But what does this really mean? It means that faith isn't about having everything figured out or seeing the entire picture at once. It's about believing that God knows what's best for you and trusting Him enough to take that first step, even when the road ahead seems unclear. Faith in this sense is not passive. It's not just about praying and hoping for things to magically fall into place. Faith is about action, acting with the confidence that God is guiding your steps. It's about taking bold steps forward, even when you don't have all the answers, and trusting that God will show you the way. When you have faith in God's plan, you can move forward with courage, knowing that He has already gone before you, clearing the path. Jesus' own life is a perfect example of faith in God's plan. From His birth in humble circumstances to His life of service, sacrifice, and love, Jesus lived out His faith in God's perfect timing. He knew that His mission was not just about personal glory, but about fulfilling the will of His Father. He prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, "Not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22:42, surrendering His own desires to God's greater purpose. In the same way, when you walk by faith, you may face trials, setbacks, or moments of doubt. But it's in these moments that faith becomes most powerful. It's in these moments that God calls you to trust in Him completely, not because everything is going well, but because you know He is good and He is faithful. When you trust that God's plan is greater than your own, you can move through life's difficulties with a sense of peace, knowing that God is working in and through you. Faith also means having confidence in God's timing. We often want things to happen on our schedule, our dreams to come to life right away, our struggles to be over quickly. But God's timing is perfect. He knows when we are ready to receive what He has for us. When you place your faith in God's timing, you can let go of anxiety and impatience. Instead of worrying about how or when your dreams will be fulfilled, you trust that God will bring them to fruition in His perfect time. Having faith also means trusting in God's ability to provide for you, even when the path forward seems impossible. In Matthew 6:26, Jesus tells us to look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? If God takes care of the birds, how much more will He care for you? When you have faith, you trust that God will provide everything you need to fulfill His purpose for your life. This doesn't mean that the journey will be without hardship, but that God will sustain you through every season, providing strength, wisdom, and resources along the way. Ultimately, faith in God's plan is about surrendering your will to His. It's about saying, "Lord, I don't know exactly where you're taking me, but I trust that you are leading me to something greater than I could ever imagine." The Bible assures us that God's ways are higher than our ways. Isaiah 55:9. Sometimes the dreams we have for ourselves are limited by our understanding, but God, in His infinite wisdom, has something far more magnificent in store. When you have faith in God's plan, you step out into the unknown with a heart full of trust. You can face challenges knowing that God is by your side and that He will never leave you or forsake you. Hebrews 13:5. This is the kind of faith that empowers you to pursue your dreams with confidence, because you know you are walking in alignment with God's purpose for your life. Living with a clear purpose is one of the most powerful principles we can learn from the life of Jesus. Everything He did, every word He spoke, every step He took was guided by purpose. Jesus didn't live by accident. He lived intentionally. He knew why He was sent into this world and never allowed distractions, opposition, or even suffering to pull Him away from His mission. In John 4:34, Jesus said, "My food is to do the will of Him who sent me and to finish His work." These words reveal a deep truth. Purpose was his nourishment. Doing God's will was not just something he did, it was what gave his life strength, meaning, and fulfillment. When you live with purpose, life gains direction. Without it, even success can feel empty. The Bible says in Proverbs 2:9-18, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." Vision gives life structure. It tells you why you're here and what God wants to accomplish through you. Your purpose is the light that guides your path when everything else seems dark. It's what gives you reason to keep moving forward, even when the road becomes difficult. Jesus' entire ministry was centered on purpose. He didn't let others define his identity or mission. When the crowds wanted to crown him as an earthly king, he withdrew to pray because his kingdom was not of this world. When he was tempted in the wilderness, he didn't let immediate comfort or personal gain distract him from his divine assignment. Every choice he made reflected an unshakable commitment to the purpose God placed upon his life. You and I are also called to live with that same sense of divine direction. God has placed unique dreams, talents, and callings within you. You were not created randomly, you were created intentionally. Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." That means your purpose already exists. It's part of God's design. It may not always be clear right away, but as you walk in faith and stay close to God, he begins to reveal it step by step. Living with purpose also requires obedience. Jesus showed us that fulfilling your calling often involves surrender. Sometimes following your purpose means walking away from comfort or saying no to things that look attractive but lead you away from God's plan. Jesus' purpose led him to the cross, a place of suffering, but also of ultimate victory. True purpose often demands sacrifice. It asks you to put God's will above your own desires. But just like Jesus, when you choose obedience, you open the door for God to do something extraordinary through your life. Another powerful aspect of living purposefully, as Jesus demonstrated, is focus. Even when the Pharisees doubted him, even when his disciples didn't fully understand him, even when people turned against him, he stayed focused. He never allowed criticism or rejection to derail his mission. When you have a clear sense of purpose, you stop living for the approval of people and start living for the approval of God. That kind of focus brings peace, confidence, and clarity, even in chaos. Purpose also brings resilience. Jesus endured betrayal, pain, and misunderstanding, yet he kept moving forward. Why? Because he knew what he was sent to do. Purpose gives you strength when your emotions are weak. It reminds you that every hardship is part of something bigger. When you know your why, you can withstand almost any how. When you walk in your God-given purpose, you become unstoppable, not because life is easy, but because you are anchored in something eternal. Your purpose gives meaning to your efforts, direction to your dreams, and strength to your spirit. Like Jesus, you begin to live not just for success, but for significance, to make an impact that glorifies God and blesses others. Perseverance is one of the most important qualities we can develop if we want to achieve our dreams, and Jesus is the ultimate example of perseverance in the face of adversity. His life wasn't a smooth, uninterrupted journey. He faced rejection, opposition, ridicule, and even death. Yet he remained steadfast, fulfilling his purpose despite the hardships. Jesus showed us that perseverance is not just about enduring the small challenges, but about remaining faithful and committed to God's calling, even in the most difficult circumstances. In Luke 22:42, as Jesus faced the ultimate test in the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." Here we see an intimate moment where Jesus acknowledged the heaviness of the road ahead. He didn't deny the pain, the difficulty, or the sacrifice he would have to make, but he also knew that perseverance was necessary. Even though he felt overwhelmed and even asked God to take away the suffering, he chose to continue forward, trusting that God's plan was greater than the immediate pain. This willingness to endure is what sets those who achieve their dreams apart. It's easy to stay motivated when things are going well, but true perseverance shines through when life gets hard. Achieving your dreams will require persistence, the strength to keep going when things don't go according to plan, and the courage to stand firm when others doubt you or when circumstances push you to give up. Jesus' example shows us that there is something more powerful than the challenges we face, and that is the commitment to our higher calling, the belief that God's purpose will prevail. Another powerful aspect of perseverance is the ability to trust in God's timing. Jesus knew that the ultimate victory would come, but he also knew that it would not happen on his timeline. In John 7:6, Jesus tells his brothers, "The right time for me has not yet come. For you any time is right." He wasn't acting out of impatience or frustration, but understood that his Father's plan was unfolding exactly as it should. Sometimes we want things to happen quickly. We want our dreams to come to fruition immediately, but God's timing is always perfect. Perseverance requires us to trust that while the road may seem long or filled with delays, God is using those seasons of waiting to prepare us for what is to come. Perseverance also involves the willingness to embrace suffering as part of the process. Jesus didn't just endure easy trials. He faced the brutal reality of physical pain, emotional betrayal, and spiritual anguish. He knew that his journey to the cross was not just about suffering for the sake of suffering, but that through his suffering, a greater purpose would be achieved. In Hebrews 12:2 it says, "For the joy set before him he endured the cross." Jesus endured not because the pain was easy, but because he knew the joy of fulfilling his mission, saving humanity. In our lives, too, there will be moments of suffering and difficulty. We may experience setbacks, failures, and moments of discouragement, but true perseverance means seeing beyond the pain to the greater good that God is accomplishing through it. Often, it's in our hardest times that God shapes us the most. Through trials, we are refined. Through suffering, we grow. It's the process that strengthens our faith, develops our character, and deepens our trust in God. Without perseverance, we would miss out on these important lessons and the character development that is needed to sustain us in the long run. Jesus' perseverance through the suffering of the cross was not just for his benefit, but for ours as well. His willingness to endure for a purpose greater than himself is a model for how we should approach our own struggles. When we persevere, we are not just enduring for the sake of enduring, we are moving towards something greater. Jesus didn't allow his circumstances to define his mission, and neither should we. The journey to achieving your dreams will come with difficulties, but it's through those challenges that you are shaped into the person capable of achieving those dreams. Finally, perseverance is rooted in hope. Jesus, even while facing rejection and pain, never lost sight of the hope that came with fulfilling his Father's will. He knew that the cross was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, the fulfillment of God's ultimate plan for salvation. For us, perseverance means holding on to the hope that God's promises will come to pass even when we don't see the results immediately. Jesus' resurrection was a powerful symbol of the hope that awaits us when we endure. When you persevere, you do so in the confidence that God is with you, that he has a greater plan, and that he will never leave you. Perseverance isn't just about holding on by sheer willpower. It's about trusting that God is using everything, even the hardest moments, to shape you for the destiny he has called you to. Just as Jesus endured the cross for the joy that was set before him, you too can endure the challenges on your path because of the hope you have in God's plan for your life. True greatness, according to Jesus, is not measured by power, wealth, or influence, but by the willingness to serve others with humility. In Mark 10:44-45, Jesus tells his disciples, "Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be the slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." This is a radical shift from the way the world views greatness. In the world, greatness is often about being at the top, holding authority, and gaining recognition. But Jesus redefined it. Greatness is found in servanthood, in how much we are willing to give, how much we are willing to sacrifice for the sake of others. Jesus was not just a teacher of servanthood, he lived it. He demonstrated it in the most profound way by washing his disciples' feet, a task that was usually reserved for the lowest servant in a household. In John 13:14-15, Jesus says, "Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." By performing this simple yet profound act of service, Jesus showed that true leadership is rooted in humility and putting others before yourself. In our pursuit of dreams and success, it's essential to remember that service is not something we do only when we have time or only when we're in the mood for it. Service is a way of life. Jesus' life shows us that greatness is not achieved by taking from others or using others to build ourselves up, but by giving, by lifting others, and by humbling ourselves to serve the needs of those around us. The question is not, how can others serve me, but rather, how can I serve others? When you approach your dreams with the mindset of service, you begin to shift your focus away from personal gain and toward the greater good. Jesus showed us that when we focus on serving others, we often find that we experience fulfillment in ways we never expected. This doesn't mean that we neglect our own needs or dreams, but that we learn to integrate service into every area of our lives. True success and greatness come not when we are lifted up, but when we help lift others up along the way. Humility, which is the cornerstone of servanthood, is also a key ingredient for success. Jesus, the Son of God, who had every right to demand respect and honor, lived a life of complete humility. In Philippians 2:6-8, it says that Jesus, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. Despite his divinity, Jesus chose to lower himself, to live among us, to suffer with us, and ultimately to die for us. In the world's view, humility is often seen as weakness or lowliness. But Jesus teaches us that true humility is not about thinking less of ourselves, but thinking of ourselves less. It's not about denying your worth, but recognizing that your worth comes from God alone, and that he has called you to use your gifts to serve others, not to elevate yourself. Humility opens doors for God to use us in powerful ways. It is through humility that God pours his grace and wisdom into our lives, equipping us for greatness that is rooted in his love and purpose, not in self-promotion. Humility is also essential for learning. When we approach our dreams with humility, we recognize that we don't have all the answers and that God can teach us through others. Jesus, though he was fully God, did not come to teach from a place of pride or superiority. Instead, he lived among people, listened to them, and patiently taught them with love and compassion. His humility allowed him to meet people where they were, to understand their struggles, and to offer them solutions that would truly transform their lives. If we are humble enough to learn from those around us, whether it's from our mentors, peers, or even our struggles, we open ourselves up to the wisdom that can propel us toward our dreams. True humility also leads to gratitude. When we serve with humility, we recognize that everything we have is a gift from God. Our talents, our opportunities, and even our challenges are part of God's purpose for our lives. Humility reminds us that we are not entitled to anything, but that everything we receive is a blessing. When we live with gratitude, we cultivate an attitude of service and joy, which then attracts more opportunities to serve and help others. Gratitude helps us stay grounded and focused on the bigger picture, God's eternal purposes, rather than getting caught up in the temporary accolades or rewards of this world. When we commit to serving others with humility, we also create a space for true leadership. Jesus, as our ultimate example, demonstrated that the best leaders are the ones who serve. When we serve others with humility, we lead by example, inspiring those around us to do the same. Leadership is not about control or authority, it's about influence. And the most powerful influence comes from those who genuinely care about the well-being of others and are willing to serve them selflessly. In practical terms, this means serving in the small, everyday actions. It's not just about grand gestures or public recognition. It's about how we treat others, how we listen to them, how we put their needs above our own. Whether it's helping a coworker, being present for a friend in need, or simply offering a kind word to someone who is struggling, we demonstrate our greatness by our willingness to serve. In doing so, we reflect the love of Jesus and fulfill the purpose he has given us. When you embrace this approach to life, an approach of service, humility, and leadership, you will see that your dreams become not just a pursuit of personal achievement, but a way to bless others and glorify God. One of the most transformative principles Jesus taught was the importance of forgiveness in achieving our dreams and overcoming obstacles. Jesus' entire ministry was built on forgiveness. He forgave those who betrayed him, those who mistreated him, and even those who crucified him. In Luke 23:34, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." This is the ultimate example of grace and mercy. Jesus didn't just teach forgiveness, he embodied it at the highest level. His life demonstrates that forgiveness is not a suggestion, but a command, a way of life that frees us from the chains of bitterness, resentment, and anger. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. Many people think of it as something we do to benefit others, but the truth is that forgiveness is primarily for our own healing. Holding on to unforgiveness is like carrying a heavy burden. It weighs us down emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. Jesus knew that the only way to truly experience peace and freedom was to forgive, and he called us to do the same. In Matthew 6:14-15, he says, "For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins." This is a powerful reminder that forgiveness is not optional for a believer. It is central to our relationship with God and our ability to move forward in life. In our journey to achieving our dreams, we will inevitably face hurt, disappointment, and betrayal. People will fail us, and circumstances may not go as we planned. But if we allow bitterness to take root in our hearts, it will prevent us from moving forward. Unforgiveness locks us in the past, keeps us tied to the pain of what others have done to us, and creates a barrier between us and God. Forgiveness, on the other hand, frees us from that past. It releases us from the need to control or change what others have done and shifts the focus to our own healing and growth. When we forgive, we choose to no longer let the actions of others define our present or future. Jesus taught that forgiveness is not about forgetting what was done to us, but about releasing the hold it has on our hearts. Forgiveness means choosing to let go of the anger, the hurt, and the desire for revenge. It means acknowledging the pain, but choosing not to allow it to control us. This act of releasing is not easy. It requires a deep reliance on God's strength. But when we forgive, we invite God's peace into our hearts, and that peace is what empowers us to continue pursuing our dreams without being weighed down by past wounds. Forgiveness also has a powerful way of transforming relationships. Jesus came to reconcile us to God, to heal the division caused by sin. In 2 Corinthians 5:18, Paul writes, "All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation." Just as God forgives us, he calls us to reconcile with others. This means that when we forgive, we not only release ourselves from bitterness, but also open the door for healing in our relationships. Whether it's a strained relationship with a friend, a family member, or even a colleague, forgiveness brings restoration. It doesn't mean that everything will return to what it was, but it does open the door for God to work and bring healing where there was once division. Forgiveness is also a powerful tool for personal growth. When we forgive, we choose to grow beyond the pain of our past. Holding on to unforgiveness stunts our emotional and spiritual maturity, while forgiveness allows us to become more like Jesus. Jesus taught us that forgiveness is an act of love, and love is the ultimate key to success in God's kingdom. In 1 Corinthians 13, Paul describes love as patient, kind, and forgiving. The more we forgive, the more we are transformed into the image of Christ. This is not only a spiritual transformation, but a personal one, because as we forgive, we become more capable of loving others deeply without holding grudges or allowing negative emotions to control us. Forgiveness also brings freedom. When we forgive, we set ourselves free from the power that the offense or the person has over us. Holding on to anger or resentment is like being chained to the past, and those chains prevent us from fully experiencing the present or moving forward into our future. In John 8:36, Jesus says, "So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." The freedom Jesus offers is not just freedom from sin, but also freedom from the emotional and spiritual burdens we carry. Forgiveness breaks those chains and allows us to step into the fullness of the life God has for us. When we forgive, we open ourselves up to the healing and restoration that only God can provide. It's important to recognize that forgiveness is not a one-time act, but a continuous choice. There may be times when we feel the pain of the offense creeping back into our hearts, and in those moments, we must choose again to forgive. It's a daily decision to let go of the hurt and trust God with the situation. The more we forgive, the more natural it becomes, because we begin to see others through God's eyes, through the lens of grace. And just as God has forgiven us much, We are called to forgive much. The more we forgive, the more we are able to walk in the freedom and peace that come from a heart that is unburdened by the weight of unforgiveness. Ultimately, forgiveness is not about denying the wrong that was done or excusing the behavior of others. It's about choosing to trust God with the justice and letting go of the need for retribution. Jesus showed us that forgiveness opens the door for God to heal and restore what was broken. It doesn't mean that everything will be made right immediately, but it does mean that God will work in our hearts and in our relationships to bring about healing and transformation. When we forgive, we participate in God's redemptive work in our own lives and in the lives of others. One of the most vital elements in achieving our dreams is the ability to take action. The Bible is filled with examples of men and women who stepped out in faith and took bold action toward their God-given purpose. Jesus himself modeled action throughout his ministry. He didn't wait for the perfect conditions to begin his mission. He acted in the moment, trusting that his obedience to God's will would lead to the fulfillment of his purpose. In Matthew 4:19, when Jesus called his disciples, he said, "Come, follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people." This invitation was not just about following Jesus physically, but about stepping out in faith and taking action to spread the gospel. Jesus didn't wait for the disciples to feel fully ready or equipped. He called them to act in faith, and it was through their action that they saw God's power at work. Taking action involves more than just making plans or having good intentions. It requires stepping into the unknown, being willing to take risks, and trusting that God will guide your steps. In James 2:17, we are reminded that faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. This means that faith is not just a belief in something, but a belief that moves us to do something. When we take action, we are showing our trust in God's guidance and our commitment to seeing our dreams fulfilled. In the parable of the talents in Matthew 25:14-30, Jesus tells the story of a master who gave his servants different amounts of money and instructed them to invest it while he was away. The servant who took action with his talents and invested them wisely was praised and rewarded, while the servant who did nothing and buried his talent was rebuked. This parable highlights the importance of using what God has given us to make progress in his kingdom. It's not enough to sit back and wait for opportunities to come to us. We are called to act with what we have, even if it seems like we don't have enough. When we take action, we demonstrate faithfulness with the resources God has entrusted to us, and he blesses those who are diligent in using what they've been given. Taking action also requires us to overcome fear. Fear can paralyze us, preventing us from taking the first step toward our dreams. But the Bible reminds us that fear is not from God. In 2 Timothy 1:7, Paul writes, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." When we take action in the face of fear, we are choosing to trust in God's strength rather than our own limitations. Jesus often told his followers, "Do not be afraid," e.g. Matthew 14:27, because he knew that fear would hold them back from fulfilling their purpose. Fear is often rooted in the unknown, but when we step out in faith, we allow God to reveal his power and provision in ways we could never have imagined. One of the most powerful stories of taking action is the account of Peter walking on water in Matthew 14:22-33. When the disciples saw Jesus walking on the water toward them, they were terrified. But Peter, in a moment of faith, called out, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus simply replied, "Come." Peter then stepped out of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. For a moment, he defied the natural laws of physics because he acted on his faith. However, when he took his eyes off Jesus and focused on the storm around him, he began to sink. This story teaches us that when we take action, we must keep our focus on Jesus. The moment we take our eyes off him and start looking at the obstacles or difficulties, we begin to doubt, and fear creeps in. But as long as we act in faith, keeping our eyes on God, he will guide us even through the storm. Taking action also requires us to persevere when things don't go as planned. Jesus never promised that following him would be easy. In fact, he warned his disciples that they would face persecution, hardship, and trials, e.g. John 16:33. But he also promised that he would be with them through it all. James 1:2-4 reminds us, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. When we face challenges on our journey toward our dreams, it's easy to become discouraged or tempted to give up. But perseverance, the ability to keep going even when things are tough, is one of the most important qualities for success. Jesus told a parable about a persistent widow in Luke 18:1-8, who kept asking a judge for justice until he finally granted her request. Jesus used this story to teach the importance of persistence in prayer and in life. He assured his followers that God is not like the unjust judge, but that he will answer the prayers of those who persist in faith. This parable reminds us that the road to achieving our dreams may not always be smooth, but we must keep pressing forward, trusting that God will provide the strength and wisdom we need. When we persevere, we demonstrate our faith in God's timing and provision. Additionally, taking action involves being intentional in the way we live and work. Jesus was very intentional in his ministry. Every step he took, every word he spoke, and every decision he made was aligned with his Father's will. He didn't waste time or energy on things that were not part of his purpose. In John 5:19, Jesus says, "Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees his Father doing." Jesus' actions were purposeful and driven by his deep connection with the Father. In the same way, we must be intentional in our actions toward our goals, seeking God's guidance in everything we do. It's easy to get distracted by the noise of the world or the opinions of others, but when we align our actions with God's will, we stay on the right path and make progress toward our dreams. Being intentional also means being disciplined. In 1 Corinthians 9:24-27, Paul speaks of running the race of life with discipline, saying, "I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize." Discipline is the ability to focus on what matters and consistently take the necessary steps to move toward our dreams, even when it requires sacrifice. Jesus demonstrated the ultimate discipline in his life as he consistently sought time with the Father in prayer, studied the Scriptures, and remained focused on his mission. Lastly, taking action involves embracing God's provision and trusting his plan. While we are called to take action, it's important to remember that it is not by our own strength or wisdom that we achieve our dreams. Jesus promises in Matthew 6:33 that if we seek first God's kingdom and righteousness, all these things will be given to us as well. Taking action doesn't mean relying solely on our own abilities, but trusting that God will provide the resources, the opportunities, and the wisdom we need along the way. As we step out in faith, God will guide our actions, open doors, and provide what we need to fulfill the dreams he has placed in our hearts. Taking action is not just about making the first step, but about staying faithful in the journey. It's about trusting that God is with you every step of the way, guiding you, strengthening you, and providing for you. Jesus showed us that when we act in faith, whether it's stepping out onto the water like Peter or trusting God with the resources he has given us, he meets us there. And though challenges may arise, we are called to persevere, to keep moving forward with intentionality, knowing that our actions are aligned with his purpose. Remember, achieving your dreams is not about perfection, it's about obedience. Each step of faith you take, no matter how small, brings you closer to fulfilling the purpose God has for you. As you follow his lead with a heart full of trust, humility, and perseverance, you will see that the path he has laid out for you is the one that will bring true success and fulfillment, not just in this life, but for eternity. Keep your eyes on him, keep moving forward in faith, and you will see God's power working through you to accomplish far more than you could ever imagine.